This is an HR program on demand, a living seed capsule of work life and workplace coming live from a rooftop in Stockholm, Sweden. It's me, Anne Marie Andric, and
me, Katarina Berg.
A vodcast, if you like, on HR, straight across the counter. Sponsored by HR The Real Deal, HR by HR for HR. Hello, Gary.
Hi, Anne Marie.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've been here before.
Once or twice.
Actually, this is your fifth time.
It is. Got to be a record now.
Good for you.
I know.
Good for us
Soon
as
to
well.
be a co-host, I reckon.
Good for you and good for us. No, but really happy to welcome you back. I thought that we were going to talk about Scout.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, super cool name as always. When you design tools for Spotify, you always make sure that they are on brand with the names as well,
That's probably the longest part of the process.
Exactly. I think earlier this year, we had an episode with you where you mentioned Scout.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, why don't we just, for the audience and the listeners, do a more deep dive into Scout. So first of all, maybe it's self-explanatory.
What is it?
Exactly. What is Scout?
Yep. So I'll set a little bit of context for Scout just for how it's kind of come about. And I think the last time we spoke, I mentioned how we try and go after big problems and solve for them.
Sure.
So I probably got involved in our succession planning process maybe a couple of years ago. And the process we go through is probably like most companies do go through. It's generally a ad hoc activity, happens once, we look at the roles, fill in roles, put it back in the filing cabinet, we'll dust it off for next year.
Such a challenge every single time.
Yeah, and it's the same names and it's the same roles. There's a kind of repetition to it. So the observation there was there must be a better way of doing this. There must be something different to do. But how do you do it better in a world where we don't have performance grades and we don't have traditional performance appraisals and we don't subscribe to that whole way of thinking? And the reality is I don't think anyone's ever really solved for that problem. It's the one that kind of gets kicked around a lot of the time.
Yeah. Are you a 1? Are you a 5? Are you an achiever? Are you an over?
Yeah.
What are you?
And
right?
just what that means for your culture and all the knock-on effects and things that come.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't subscribe to the view that you do have to have performance ratings, but again, it doesn't solve for the challenge of how do you move on your agenda with how you identify talent, where do you find it? So where Scout came from was, could we develop a capability that had a always-on mentality for consistently looking across the organization for talent? Mm-hmm. And could we create a platform and tool that acted as a kind of centralized repository for all of that information? So you kind of got the repository side of things, but what makes Scout quite unique is that it's always on, analysing the data we have on our employees to potentially identify people who could be performing well in their role. Mm-hmm. The quick disclaimer, we're not making automated decisions about people. It's merely to surface potential names and potential candidates. So like I say, if you're looking at HR functions, I think I mentioned this to you previously, it's generally the top 5%, top 10% of your organisation is known pretty well.
Yeah.
Your kind of general senior people, which is why a lot of the time the same names generally circulate around. When you get to the size we are now, 8, 9, 10,000 people, it's just not possible to have that level of depth throughout the whole organisation.
No.
So what we want to do is, how could we analyse that and create a capability where you could really deep dive and look into your organisation at more people in more junior roles, people who might want to potentially look at developing and otherwise. But it needs a human intervention to assess what Scout suggests, and whether they think that that's a good recommendation or not based on the information that they know.
Right.
So that's at a very high level what Scout is.
Excellent. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Scout was launched at the end of last year.
Yes, correct.
So it's been rolling basically for 2023.
Yes.
Yeah. What have you learned?
What have we learned? It's a challenging area. I think that's kind of, and I think where do you have? Sometimes these platforms, if I'm honest, I think we were slightly ahead of the curve with Scout. Mm-hmm. I think we spotted something that was going to be coming for the business, that the business was kind of getting up to where our thinking was. Mm-hmm. If you put it in the context of when we launched, when kind of Scout was being built and launched, we were in our biggest growth year.
Right,
Exactly. And actually just getting people through the door was a huge priority and otherwise. If you flip that kind of where we are now, and the focus we now have on things like internal mobility, how we're, people growing their career, moving across Spotify and otherwise, you start to generate a really strong need for a platform like Scout. So, and obviously we've got areas like Echo and things before. So part of it's been timing for Scout, of just like waiting for the right opportunity of when people really when the use case for it really becomes important to the business.
True, yeah.
And I think, so what we're starting to see now is sort of two factions of how you can use it. One is back to the succession planning information I was talking about before, and how you can look at, building your talent bench and your rising stars and making sure you've got a kind of diverse group of people and potentially people you haven't looked at previously. So that's certainly one. The other big one is how we can leverage it for our talent acquisition teams when they're looking for internal candidates.
Right.
So how can they leverage Scout to build shortlists, to recruit for roles? So we've had some really good success stories of instances where, recruiters have gone in, been able to see people from the platform and gone and reached out and then ultimately made a hire. But then we also get the other knock-on benefit of it is, again, people underestimate the, we had an example, role was being hired for, we approached 2 people internally for it using Scout. One person went through for the role and was successful, the other person wasn't successful, but actually came out with just a really great experience because he got approached about a role he didn't know about, wasn't thinking about.
Right.
But just the fact that he was approached and considered for it, for him, was just a great experience.
True.
That we were actually really caring, looking at this in detail and going, we know you might not think this is something for you, but we think you might be good for it. So we got the benefit of being able to fill a role with internal talent, which is a real positive.
Yeah.
But also this other knock-on benefit of even for someone who wasn't successful in the process, felt great going through the process. And it wouldn't have happened had we not had Scout and our TA colleagues have been able to look through and build a short list of internal candidates. Yeah,
exactly. Fantastic. And you mentioned TA. Is it TA or is it the talent team? I mean, the learning and development team who are using Scout, or both?
So both, yeah. So
both of them?
Both, yeah. So talent acquisition, so our kind of recruitment.
Yeah.
And then we've got our kind of talent team who are looking at our performance development and our ongoing talent. And their team look after Echo as well, which is our kind of internal marketplace for roles and projects and assignments and things.
Right, exactly.
So both teams.
Both teams. Okay, excellent. What are you most proud of?
That's a good question. The thing I'm most proud of, I generally think we've answered the question of whether you need performance grades or not. Because
the answer is no.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
I really don't think you do. And that was the kind of plan we started off when we started with it. Could you solve for that problem? Because I haven't heard anyone who has. So we were able to just distill that argument down to its real principal points and create a platform that kind of does it. So I think for me that's the proudest thing of Scout. I still think we've got a bit of a journey of people really seeing what the platform's capable of and things like that. I do think we were just ever so slightly ahead of the curve with when we launched it. But I think there's another example. So that I'm definitely proud. I think the other thing that would be a close second is just it's a really practical example of how you can take people analytics, embed it at the absolute core of a product that drives real behavior, that's optimizing us for a function, but also having a really positive effect on people in the business when they're recruiting for roles. So, but yeah, I think the proudest is I think we answered it.
On the grades.
Yeah. So
on the ratings.
On the ratings.
Yeah, and also making sure that you stay true to your philosophy when your talent grows, when your Spotifyers grow, then the company grows, right? Exactly. So what is then Scout 2.0? What would that be?
Yeah, it's one we're actually looking through now. So I think to your point with the lessons learned, I think where we, as we have this sort of real focus now as a company on internal mobility and how people can grow their careers and otherwise, we're starting to see just other opportunities where, particularly on the TA side, the talent acquisition side of things, where we can optimize for them and help them. I think there's sort of some of the Scout reports and things that we have that's going to get a bit of a revamp, but there's just some, I think, functionality and features which that whole process of shortlisting and really quickly being able to identify people across the business, I think some of that can be can be optimized. I think the open question we have for Scout is, the vision we always had was, I'll back up a second. So the context for Scout, where it came from initially, was actually like sports was the big analogy.
Right, exactly.
And like being from the UK and a football or a soccer fan for US was like, if you take scouting and football in the UK, it goes all the way down to like dads on the side of a pitch, watching their kids play.
Or mothers.
Oh, mother, of course. Usually mothers.
Or grandmothers, grandfathers.
All the family.
Everyone.
Everyone there.
Yeah.
But it was this idea of how could we, so this idea of a huge network and people inputting into that network. So the kind of hope is, do we reach a stage in evolution with Scout where you can actually grow the network of who's inputting into the system? So yes, we have the data side of things, we have a HR side of things, but can we leverage some more of the business side of things, which I think will have its challenges, but it's an interesting, I think that's a natural evolution of it but it can stay where it can stay where it is right now, and it does a huge benefit. But I think that's an interesting evolution for it. Of could you get more inputs coming from people in the business who are seeing things day to day, and how do you take in that information? How do you remove the bias? All the traditional things that you'd normally have with these type of things.
Exactly.
So, that's one area we could see going into it, I think.
Wonderful. So nice. Excellent work. As always, thank you so much for sharing.
Pleasure.
5 times on the VOD. I think we'll close 2023, and then for 24...
That's my last time.
No, 2024, I'm sure you will get invited back.
Yeah, I want a badge, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. So, closing it.
Yes.
Yes.
Stay safe, stay strong, stay active.
Ida medalje. Gary. Scout is Scout.
What is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. The glasses. Here we go. A bit of a sip. Hello. We invited you back.
Again.
I can't believe it, you're back.
We're really struggling for content.
No, we're not. Open chest, look at each other, pretend you like one another. Let it simmer a bit.
That's what kind of
exactly. You simmer a bit. I have so many pictures with Gary. Cool shoes.
Thank you.
Look at those.
An unhealthy habit.
Very classy.
Thank you.
They pay you well?